Hello, our lecture today for the research method course for business students is analyzing quantitative data. After we had collected our data through questionnaire or different techniques, we need to analyze these data to make our discussion and conclusion in order to continue writing and see what we have found in our research project. From this chapter, we expect to learn the main issue that we need to consider when preparing our quantitative data for analysis and to understand the implication of these types of data and to know how to code these data to prepare for analyzing by computer and different techniques. Moreover, to select the most appropriate techniques to find and to measure the variables and to examine the relationship, the cause and effects, what type of the relation between these variables. Moreover, what type of charts, tables, program that we need in order to visualize our data finding. The key points that to be taken in the consideration for the quantitative data analysis, that data must be analyzed in order to produce information. So we move from raw data in order to process this data to have good information. Computer software analysis, people used to use Excel and statistical package for social science or other program in order to process these data. Data should be carefully prepared for analysis to be out of errors as much as possible. Researchers also need to select and use different charting and statistical techniques in order to process the data. The main concern, preparing your data to make it as a good table, inputting and checking twice the data, test and retest your data, choosing the most appropriate statistics for describing this data, and to examine the relationship and trends. So what type of data that may we have? As it a quantitative, that means that it's numerical or binomial to be measured, what the data format that accepted by the software program, the impact of data coding in order to be understandable, and case weighting and methods also to be applied to check the errors. So let's have a look that we collect our data. Can data be classified into more than two sets? So it's binomial, descriptive, or can this be ranked to be descriptive or ranked to be just categorical, 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever, first, second, third, or just to choose between the gender, male or female, or this one can be numerically as a quantitative or a quantity. So if it's a quantity in numerical data, the difference between two data values can be calculated as interval data for describing period or just a ratio. And this, can the data theoretically take any value within range? If it's yes, so it's continuous data. That means when you ask how many times do you visit this shopping center per month, somebody will say 5, 7, 12, 15, 14, or whatever. So it's continuous figures. While the others, when you say how many people do you have as a director, as a staff in your college or in your company, somebody will say 5, somebody will say 7. So it's not continuous, it's differ from organization to another. So preparing to input and check your data, a simple data matrix that we have the case, the participant 1, 2, 3, whatever, and we give him ID from 1 to the end of the number of the sample that representing the population, and the answer for each variable continuous, 27, 24, whatever, 1, 2, 3, for each variables in order to prepare for analyzing. Main data categories for coding: numerical data that has value and has quantity, and precise than categorical, which say that the rank, the first or the second or the third or whatever, and could be interval or ratio, or could be continuous data. The other types is the categorical data, which cannot be measured numerically, but it can be classified and ranking, rank 1, rank 2, rank 3, like the gender, female or male, like survive, not survive, pregnant, not pregnant, sick, not sick, something like this. Let's have a look on the main data categories for coding. If we have like the variable concentration of ownership, we have like 10%, 20%, 50%, and etc. Percentage, actual percentage held by largest shareholder, also like to be binomial, separated, not separated, survived, not survived, affected, not affected, or related, not related. Number of directors on the board, we'll have number. Legal origin of the target firm, like English, not English, opposed, not opposed. We have a lot of examples that in order to understand the types of categorizing for coding. That's the most important things, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. If you have entered good data, you will have good finding. Otherwise, it's just a matter of wasting your time. Always take time to check for error, not to be hasty, to have precise entering your data into the program. So exploring and presenting your data. After you have processed your data, it will be in type, in shape of table or diagrams, paragraph, in order to be visualized, to be as an information. Something have more value, to have specific value, to give you specific value, to find the highest and lowest value, and we'll have an example for this. Trends over time, to compare between years, the selling, the amount of selling some items, to compare between different years, and proportions as a ratio, and the distributions also. So this is one of the most important books, 12.8, that for both diagrams and table, to have brief, clear, and descriptive title, and we'll see the examples, to have the units in order to have good meanings, and the same for the diagrams, to have axes, X and Y axis, that show the years. The other will show the amount of spending in sterling or whatever. And for table, does it have a clear column and row headings, in order to have information that clear and easy to understand by the readers. It has a specific value. It have the highest and the lowest, in order to be able to make comparison and to be understand in analyzing. It's skewed to the right or to the left. It will show you the proportions, the distribution of the value. So it should be visualized, your data to be processed to information, to be understandable by the readers of your article. One of the diagrams that can be used is the bar chart. We need to have space between these bars. It's related to the countries, to the emission of CO2 or something like this, and to have 1,000 tons for the quantity, to be understandable, that to compare the amount with each country, which country release more, something related to the environments. Or we can have the histogram or the pictogram. Also, it will show the highest value, the lowest value, and it should be understandable the amount spent per visit in sterling or pound, and the frequency number of customers that is spent. For example, 100 sterling, it will be around 1,200, something like this. Or we can have the pie chart that will show for the northern, eastern, for some region, the total sales for some organization to compare between the sales in percentage and ratio. So we need to compare the variables in order to show the specific values and independence, highest and lowest, the proportion for each region, and trends or conjunctions. Comparing variables in order to show the totals, proportions, distribution of values, relationship between cases for variables. In order to process your data, you need to be aware about two items: the central tendency, where the most cases centered in which area, and the depression, when we are talking about standard deviation, and you need to know how much it deviates from the mean. What's the coefficient of variance? To know the correlation, you need to have some basic knowledge of data analysis in order to be able to understand something that when you read some articles, when you reach to the finding, the discussion, the conclusion, and you see the tables, you see if it's significant or not, what high correlation, in order to understand what these items mean. To represent the value occurring most frequently, we are talking about the mode. When we are talking about the middle of the value, we are talking about the median. And it's well known for everybody when we are talking about the average. So describing the depression in order to state the difference between values. It should be different values in order to be processed, to describe and to compare to what extent these values that differ from each other. If here is the mean and this above the mean, and some values will be lower than the mean. So describing the depression also, state the difference between highest and lowest value, the depression. State difference within the middle, how much it's differ from and varies from the middle. The difference within another fraction of the value, to see the variance, to see the coefficient of variance, and to see index numbers also. So to examine the relationship, the differences, and the trends, we need the statist to test for significant relationship and differences. The same determining probability of making type 1 error, and we'll talk about type 1 error and type 2 error also. To talk about the correlation, the association between variables. If one variable, like the amount of how many hours of sun do we have during the day, that affect our sales or the company sales of ice cream during spring season, during summer season. So which variable affect or lead the change in the other variable? So the correlation and cause and effect in the relation, and to know that the values of correlation to be good, it should be close to +1. And 0.7 is strong positive, while minus 0.7 is strong negative, and -0 is perfect negative, while 0, that means there is no relation. Let's have a look in statistics to examine relationship and differences also, to test whether two variables are associated with each other. We need to use the chi-square to test whether two groups or categories are different, and to use another techniques. If there is also some more groups are different, we use the ANOVA techniques, and the strength of relationship is the most important between dependent variable and independent variable that cause effect in the dependent variable, to use coefficient of determination, regression coefficient. We use regression analysis, we use logistic analysis also. Let's have a look on type 1 error and type 2 error, as it's related to the how much the confidence in your data. Type 1 occur when the null hypothesis has been wrongly rejected. It should not be rejected, that we assume that there is no relation between the two variables, and we reject the null hypothesis and we assume that there is a relation. But actually, there is no relation. While type 2 error, when a researcher doesn't reject the null hypothesis when he should. So it's the alternative techniques. So we reach to the summary that we need to process our data in order to have a good information. When we use linear regression, we use the logistic regression, we may use the confirmatory analysis or discrimination analysis. We use different techniques like Excel, or use statistical package for social science in order to have a good interpretation of our data. What we need to remember always, data for quantitative analysis can be collected, then to be coded in order to have some meaningful meaning for the scale measurements. Then we have summary of tables and the graph after we put it in the matrix to be processed also. Codes should be entered for all data, maybe at the beginning or pre-coded, after coded, and existing coding scheme enable comparison between variables. The most important to check that our data is out of error as much as possible. Initial analysis should be use both tables and diagrams to visualize your finding and to be understandable by the readers. Subsequent analysis involve describing data and to explore the type, the nature of the relationship between variables, which one lead to have an effect on other variable. If some variable increase or one variable increase, the other is increased, so it's positive relationship. If one variable is decreased, the other one is decreased also, so it's negative relationship, to see not just type of the relation and the direction of the relation between variables. By this, we conclude our lecture. Thank you very much.